If your living room smelled like shag carpet and melted plastic, and your mom's favorite chair was covered in squeaky vinyl, welcome home. The 70s weren't just a decade, they were a vibe, a strange, warm, avocado-colored vibe.
This is a super fun rug. I would not really advise you installing it wall to wall, but it's going to make a really great custom area rug.
And if you grew up in that era, these 25 things probably lived in your house, your hands, or your heart until they quietly disappeared. 1. Station wagons. You couldn't climb into the back of a station wagon without battling over who claimed the way back. That final row, facing backward, feet pressed against the glass, waving at bewildered drivers trailing behind you. The wood paneling looked sophisticated for maybe a week before it began peeling. None of that mattered. Those wagons were mobile playgrounds, hauling us everywhere. Summer road trips, baseball practice, or just tagging along while Mom hit the grocery store. Something cinematic happened when you rode backward, watching the world retreat instead of approaching. Windows fogged from laughter, and every pothole felt amplified when you couldn't see what was coming. Seatbelts stayed optional. Elbows flew freely. And somehow 7 cousins squeezed into a 5-passenger car and made it work. That was pure 70s magic. The creak of the tailgate, the hum of rolling wheels, the stale air mixed with vinyl scent. That wasn't just transportation. That was a core memory. You didn't mind how loudly it rattled or how scorching the seatbelt buckles became. That wagon meant freedom, and freedom back then came with wood panels, sticky windows, and at least one sibling trying to elbow you from the prime seat. And when you finally tumbled from the wagon and dashed inside, your feet sank into an ocean of shag carpeting. Shag carpeting, thick, wild plush, and nearly impossible to vacuum properly. Shag wasn't merely floor covering, it was a lifestyle. Gold, avocado, burnt orange, colors that shouldn't have meshed together but somehow did, because subtlety wasn't even in the vocabulary back then. This wasn't carpet. This was terrain that swallowed toys, harbored secrets, and always felt warm beneath your toes. You could run your fingers through it like grass, sprawl face down watching Saturday morning cartoons, and surface with fibers clinging to your cheeks like nature's confetti. And shag didn't stop at the living room. It crept upstairs, blanketed entire hallways. Some homes even featured it in bathroom, a bold, bizarre choice that now lives in interior design legend. But in the 1970s, it made perfect sense. Comfort ruled everything, and nothing felt more luxurious than sinking ankle-deep into fuzzy flooring. Cleaning it? Good luck. You could vacuum for hours and still discover crumbs from last Christmas. But nobody complained. Because if your feet weren't brushing shag, were you really home? Naturally, when evening arrived and the house finally settled, your eyes would drift toward the mesmerizing glow of 3 lava lamps. Lava lamp bubbling silently in the corner. These weren't simply lights. They were living, breathing blobs of mystery that danced and swirled in slow motion like alien plasma. You didn't just glance at a lava lamp. You zoned out completely. Hours vanished. Homework forgotten. Minds floating into daydreams as pinks melted into purples and blobs stretched, twisted, then dissolved back into themselves. They inhabited bedrooms, basements, and rec rooms, each one a quiet companion for bored kids and reflective teenagers. Nobody understood how they functioned. Nobody asked. You just knew you had to let it warm up first, and once it started moving, reality faded away. This was mood lighting before that became a thing. Therapy in a bulb. And for many of us, the closest we ever came to meditation. Keep your LED strips. Give us one glass tower of glowing goo and a beanbag chair, and we're set for the night. If you wanted music to match the atmosphere, you slid in a chunky 8-track tape players. 8-track tape, that unmistakable clunk as it locked into position, meant you were about to experience magic. You couldn't skip songs, you couldn't rewind, you simply listened start to finish, whether you liked every track or not. And that click mid-song? Iconic. This was the soundtrack for road trips, house cleaning, and backyard barbecues. 8 tracks weren't convenient, but they possessed soul. You'd stack them in the glove compartment or a crate beside the stereo, half unlabeled, others marked with smeared handwriting like Disco Mix or Dad's Favorite. Every household owned several. Every car featured that peculiar slide-in player bolted beneath the dashboard, and every kid learned how to eject it and blow dust from the contacts before shoving it back in with hope and gentle force. It wasn't polished or perfect, but when that tape caught just right and the player didn't devour it, pure magic happened. Now, if your dad took audio seriously, you might have owned a genuine 5. Reel-to-reel tape recorders, reel-to-reel tape recorder. This contraption looked like NASA equipment or Cold War spy gear. 2 spinning reels, yards of brown tape, glowing buttons, and that hypnotic mechanical hum. Less music player, more sacred ritual. You weren't permitted near it. Maybe, just maybe, you could stand close and watch those reels spin hypnotically. Dad would carefully thread the tape, press several buttons, then settle back like a pilot initiating takeoff. The sound was crisp, clean, authentic, like the band performed in your living room. The reels would gradually unwind, delivering song after song while the machine clicked and whirred softly. If it jammed, panic ensued. If the tape snapped, it felt like witnessing a masterpiece destroyed. You didn't repair it, you mourned it. But when everything worked perfectly, oh, when it worked, music reached its purest form. Warm, full, alive, the kind of sound that made conversations stop and listening begin. Using communication back then required an entire ceremony, starting with the 6 rotary dial phones. Rotary dial phone. First, you had to locate it, usually mounted on the kitchen wall, with a 10-foot cord stretched halfway into the living room. Then came the dialing ritual itself. Lift the heavy receiver, listen for that dial tone. Yes, that was actually necessary, and slowly rotate the dial for each number. Mess up even once. Back to square one. That circular dance wasn't just tactile, it was personal. The rhythm of each call carried its own vibe, quick for friends, slow and hesitant for the school principal. And while numbers clicked back into position, you had time to think, hesitate, rehearse your words. Unlike today's instant messaging, this was communication with weight. And don't forget the cord, perpetually tangled. You'd wrap it around your finger, stretch it down the hallway for minimal privacy, or yank it when someone tripped over it. Phones weren't mobile, but the chaos certainly was. And when someone hung up in frustration, that slam of the receiver into its cradle thundered through the entire house. When reality grew boring, you reached for your 7 Viewmaster viewers. Viewmaster, this chunky red binocular device, could transport you across the globe or into Saturday morning cartoons within seconds. You'd insert the cardboard reel, peer through the eyepieces, and click. Suddenly, you weren't sitting on shag carpet. You were experiencing Disney's Jungle Cruise or exploring outer space. The images appeared crisp, luminous, mysteriously three-dimensional. And that tiny plastic wheel with the thumb switch felt like gripping a time machine. Reels arrived in sets, cartoons, nature scenes, landmarks, fairy tales. Some thrilled, others educated, but all shared one quality, magic. You never viewed just one reel. It became a whole stack, clicking from dimension to dimension like channel surfing with your fingertips. When one reel finished, you'd flip it over and start again until daylight shifted or siblings demanded their turn or dinner called from the kitchen. But even then, the Viewmaster waited patiently, always ready to escape ordinary reality, one image at a time. You weren't properly equipped for school without your 8 metal lunchboxes and thermoses. Metal lunchbox, decorated in cartoon glory and dented from countless backpack drops. It clanged when it hit the floor, reeked of last week's tuna sandwich, and was absolutely glorious. Inside waited treasure. a matching thermos that doubled as a drinking cup, a folded paper towel your mom used instead of napkins, and a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Sometimes the thermos leaked, sometimes it smelled peculiar, but it always made lunch feel like an event. Those boxes announced your identity to the world: Scooby-Doo enthusiast, Star Wars fanatic, or Brady Bunch devotee. They weren't just food containers. They held crayons, stickers, secrets, and yes, occasionally a bruised banana nobody ever ate. When lunch ended, you'd snap it shut and carry it like a badge of honor. Scratches, stickers, mystery odors, each one earned through daily experience. Today's lunch bags don't rattle, don't clang, and definitely don't feel like miniature suitcases packed with personality. Only the 70s could create a cultural phenomenon from a 9. Pet rocks. Pet rock, a literal rock sold in a box with air holes, straw bedding, and an instruction manual. And millions of people bought them. No feeding required, no walks, no veterinary bills, just companionship in its purest form. Kids would decorate them with googly eyes, assign them names, even bring them to school. The ultimate low-maintenance pet, and surprisingly, one of the decade's most discussed toys. Owning a pet rock conveyed something important. You possessed a sense of humor. You understood the joke, and maybe your parents didn't want to handle hamster cleanup duties. Despite the absurdity, they worked. They occupied bookshelves, windowsills, and classroom desks, quiet, loyal, unbothered. Proof that 1970s marketing could transform literally anything into a phenomenon. Nothing said rebellion quite like collapsing into a 10 beanbag chairs, beanbag chair, and refusing to get up. These vinyl blobs stuffed with tiny pellets weren't really chairs. They were commitments. Once you sat down, you were invested for the duration. They arrived in psychedelic colors and made sounds like slowly deflating balloons. If the vinyl tore, little pellets scattered everywhere like confetti from an unplanned party. Yet every kid wanted one because no adult looked dignified trying to escape from one. Beanbag chairs weren't about posture. They were about attitude. You could sprawl, roll, twist, or disappear entirely. Perfect for watching cartoons, playing Atari, or sulking about chores. If you owned two, game on. Beanbag battles, launching pads, fort walls. They weren't just furniture, they were entertainment. And when one flattened from excessive love, you'd beg parents for another replacement, because comfort this chaotic couldn't be found in anything with legs. Walk into any 1970s living room and glance upward. Chances are you'd spot a 11 macrame plant hangers. Macrame plant hanger swaying in the corner like a homemade jungle snare. These weren't mere decorations. They proved your mom possessed taste, time, and a stack of Reader's Digest patterns. Knotted with care and suspended from ceiling hooks, they cradled ferns, spider plants, and sometimes entire terrariums. The yarn was typically tan, maybe mustard yellow or rust orange, always coordinating with drapes or that oversized owl wall art. Some featured beads, others had fringe. Some were so elaborate they resembled fishing nets on vacation, but they all carried that handcrafted feel, even store-bought versions, and they screamed peace, love, and slightly overwatered greenery. Macrame didn't stop at plants either. Shelves, curtain ties, wall hangings, no limits exist. While today's versions lean boho chic, back then they simply announced this room needed atmosphere. If you ever stood up and felt your skin peel away from furniture, congratulations, you survived the 12 plastic couch cover era. These vinyl shields were designed to protect grandmother's good couch from wear and tear. What they actually accomplished was transforming living rooms into sweaty greenhouses. They squeaked when you shift, they crinkled when you sat. And in summer, forget it. One wrong movement and you were branded like cattle. They stayed because those couches were sacred, floral, tufted, and often untouched by bare human skin, thanks to these shiny, heat-trapping barriers. You'd dare cousins to jump on one and slide, you'd giggle when legs stuck, and occasionally someone would attempt removal only to face scandalized gasps from older generations. Protect the couch at all costs, even if it meant sacrificing comfort, dignity, and the backs of your thighs. 13. Fondue sets. Dinner in the 1970s could become a full production thanks to the magical, mystical fondue set. A large, bubbling pot of cheese, or sometimes chocolate, took center stage, with guests skewering chunks of bread, fruit, or mystery meat, and dunking them like culinary baptism. These sets were proudly displayed in original packaging, gifted at weddings, or passed down like sacred relic. They included color-coded forks, small stands with flames, and guaranteed someone would either double dip or drop something into the pot and fish for it like a gold prospector. Fondue wasn't just a meal, it was an experience. Slow, interactive, slightly hazardous. There was artistry in twirling cheese just right, and strategy in avoiding tongue burns. If you were truly sophisticated, you owned multiple sets: cheese for appetizers, chocolate for dessert. These days we microwave and dash. Back then, fondue brought people together one gooey bite at a time. Only the 70s would hand kids. 14. Click-clack balls. Clackers. 2 rock-hard acrylic balls on a string, and say, "Go have fun." Click-clack balls, also known as clackers, were noisy, dangerous, and completely irresistible. You'd grip the middle string and whip the balls up and down, trying to make them collide above and below your hand. When it worked, it created a satisfying clack-clack-clack rhythm. When it didn't, it made contact with your wrist, eye, or whatever unlucky body part got in the way. Kids wore bruises like medals of honor. Schools banned them. Parents hid them. Hospitals probably maintained wings just for clacker injuries. But we loved them. Brighter and more sparkly, the better. Some even contained air bubbles inside like rogue marbles. They weren't just toys, they were training tools for pain tolerance, coordination, and ignoring adult warnings. 15. Pong, home video game console. Long before downloading apps or streaming 3D shooters, there was Pong, a home video game so simple it approached Zen. 2 white paddles, 1 white dot, a black screen, and endless, glorious blip-blip sounds. Atari console hosting Pong wasn't flashy. It featured knobs instead of joysticks, required actual TV tuning rather than HDMI cables. Yet it blew our minds. This was the future, living right beside the lava lamp. You'd sit cross-legged on the floor, turn the knob, and send that dot bouncing back and forth like digital tennis. It was slow, repetitive, totally addictive. You didn't need high scores, you just needed to avoid losing. Occasionally, the dot would catch in a glitch, bouncing endlessly in a corner. That was your break. Grab snacks, return, and the game would still be running. Pong wasn't flashy. It didn't need to be. It was the moment pixels met fun, and it changed everything. 16. Waterbeds. If you grew up thinking sleeping meant staying mostly still, you clearly never owned a waterbed. These squishy, sloshy beds were 1970s status symbols, part mattress, part novelty ride. Lying down felt like surrendering to the ocean. The bed shifted under your weight, rippled when you rolled over, and occasionally made gurgling sounds that reminded you an entire ecosystem existed under your sheets. For kids, it was magic. For adults, a chiropractor's nightmare. And don't forget the heating system. Some waterbeds included internal heaters to keep beds warm during winter. If you were lucky, it functioned. If not, it felt like napping on cold soup. Making the bed became an Olympic event. Fitted sheets didn't really fit, corners popped loose, and you had to avoid puncturing vinyl with anything sharp unless you wanted bedroom flooding at 2 a.m. Still, for one brief, glorious moment, sleeping on a giant water bag felt like the future. A wavy, unpredictable, oddly cozy future. In a world before reward points and online cashback, there were 17 S&H green stamps. S&H green stamps. You didn't earn them with click. You earned them with groceries, gasoline, and patience. Cashiers would hand you stacks of green stamps with every purchase. Then you'd go home, peel them from backing, and stick them into stamp books with care usually reserved for fine art. Page after page, you filled those books with dreams toasters, blenders, maybe lawn chairs if you saved enough. It wasn't instant gratification, it was a long game. Flipping through redemption catalogs was a family event. You circled items, made your case, and fantasized about finally trading 10 full books for that fondue set. Eventually, you'd walk into an S&H redemption center, clutching your stamp-filled treasure like a briefcase full of cash, and leave with a brand new popcorn popper and a grin lasting all week. 18, Pop Rocks, candy. Some candies melt, others crunch, but only one exploded inside your mouth, no less. Pop Rocks were less snack, more science experiment gone deliciously right. Tear open the packet, pour the pebbles onto your tongue, and wait. Instantly, they'd start fizzing, snapping, crackling like fireworks against your tongue. It felt like eating lightning, and we loved it. Some kids swore mixing Pop Rocks with soda would make you explode. Others dared you to chew with your mouth open so they could hear the show. Either way, Pop Rocks weren't just candy. They were conversation starters. They arrived in neon packets with flavors like strawberry, watermelon, and blue raspberry. Once you had them, you didn't eat anything else for a while. You just sat there, eyes wide, mouth popping like a firecracker. They didn't last long. But neither did disco, and we're still talking about both, before megaplexes and reclining seats. 19. Drive-in movie theaters. Movie night meant piling into the car and heading to the drive-in theater. You didn't just go see a film, you experienced it from a Buick's back seat with a speaker hooked to your window. You'd pack snacks, blankets, bug spray. The screen loomed large against the night sky, and sometimes, if you squinted, you could see stars behind spaceship chase scenes. If parents felt wild, they let you stay in pajamas. Some kids fell asleep halfway through. Others watched entire double features while munching popcorn parents smuggled in. Windows fogged, sound crackled, and when previews started, the whole lot buzzed with headlights flashing and engines idling. Sure, it wasn't always comfortable, but it was magical because watching movies outdoors, surrounded by cars, crickets, and cousins, made everything feel more epic. 20. Encyclopedia salesman. In the 1970s, knowledge didn't come from Google. It came from a door-to-door encyclopedia salesman in a brown suit holding the entire universe in 2 sample volumes. These guys had pitches. They'd knock politely, sit at your kitchen table, and unfold the dream. Your child, smarter, more successful, more worldly, all thanks to 26 leather-bound volumes of information. Parents nodded, kids yawned, but eventually deals were struck, and weeks later, giant boxes arrived with your shiny new Britannica set. Suddenly, your living room bookshelf resembled a library. Research projects covered, questions about volcanoes or aardvarks solved, dusting those things a chore forever. And let's be honest, we mostly used them for color photos and transparent human anatomy overlays. They weren't just books, they were status symbols, and for a while, they made houses feel smarter. 21. Wacky packages, stickers. Before memes and parodies went viral online, they lived on your lunchbox in the form of wacky packages. These sticker cards took everyday products and twisted them into hilarious gross-out versions that made every kid laugh and every teacher sigh. Captain Crud, Levirus soap, Pall Mall cigarettes. They were bold, colorful, completely inappropriate, which made them even better. You'd buy them in packs like trading cards, sniff the gum, maybe chew it if it wasn't petrified, then carefully peel and stick them onto school books, lockers, and trapper keepers. Some schools banned them. Some parents disapproved. But we loved them. They weren't just funny. They were subversive, little jabs at consumer culture that made us feel clever and slightly rebellious. If you owned the complete collection, you were basically playground comedy royalty. 22. Electric football game. The electric football game looked like the coolest toy ever. until you turned it on. A metal field, plastic players, and a motor that made everything vibrate like it was having a nervous breakdown. You'd spend 20 minutes setting up the perfect play. Offensive line, quarterback, wide receivers. Then flip the switch. Players buzzed across the field, spinning, bumping, mostly going nowhere. But occasionally one would actually head in the right direction, and the whole room erupted. There was a learning curve, like bending little metal tabs under players to steer them. And it never worked the same way twice. But that unpredictability was what made it special. When a touchdown did happen, it felt like divine intervention. It wasn't about winning, it was about laughing, shouting, arguing over whether the guy in blue actually crossed the goal line. Spoiler, he probably didn't. 23. Sun-in-hair lightener for get salons. In the 70s, all you needed for a summer makeover was a bottle of Sun-In. This lemony spray promised golden highlights with nothing but sunlight and dreams. You'd spritz it generously before heading outside, hoping to return looking like a surfer. Sometimes you did. More often, your hair turned a shade of orange not found in nature. Didn't matter. It smelled great and felt rebellious, like controlling your destiny one mist at a time. Sun-In wasn't just for girls either. Plenty of boys tried it too, hoping for that beachy look without beaches. Usually it came with a side of crunchy hair dried out by peroxide and ambition. You'd stand in front of mirrors, tilting your head, trying to spot the change. Was that lighter? Maybe? Probably? Either way, you were convinced you looked cool, and that was all that mattered. 24. Smello pens, scented markers. Art class in the 1970s wasn't complete without scented markers, officially called smello pens. These brightly colored felt tips didn't just color your paper. They filled rooms with sugary synthetic smells that hit like candy stores in your nose. There was cherry, grape, licorice, lemon, and that weird brown one that might have been root beer. Kids would hoard favorites, trade them like currency, sometimes sniff them so much it caused headaches. You didn't even need to draw, just uncapping them was entertaining enough. You'd compare smells, rank them, occasionally sneak a whiff during math class. Teachers hated them. We couldn't get enough. These markers were social currency. You'd sit at those long tables in art class, carefully negotiating trades like a Wall Street broker. I'll give you my cherry for your grape and that sparkly purple one. Everyone knew the hierarchy. Cherry and grape were premium, while that mysterious brown marker nobody could identify always got traded last. The ritual was always the same. First, you'd pull off the cap with that satisfying pop sound, then hold it close to your nose for that first intoxicating whiff. The scent would hit immediately, artificial, sweet, so concentrated it almost made your eyes water. Then came the inevitable sharing. "Smell this one. What do you think it is?" You'd pass markers around like fine wine, each kid taking their turn to inhale deeply and render their verdict. Teachers would patrol with that look of resigned frustration, knowing more sniffing than drawing was happening. They'd confiscate markers from obvious offenders, the ones who held them up to their noses like they were huffing paint, but we were crafty. We learned to be subtle, a quick sniff, while pretending to examine the tip, or holding the cap just close enough to catch the scent while appearing to concentrate on artwork. The markers had this weird psychological effect, too. You'd uncap that cherry one, and suddenly your entire project had to match that energy. Cherry meant bold, confident strokes. Grape made you feel artistic and sophisticated. That mysterious brown one? It made everything feel like a mistake, but you used it anyway because waste not, want not. And then there were the casualties, Markers left uncapped would dry out overnight, their felt tips becoming sad, frayed shadows of their former selves. The devastation was real when you discovered your favorite grape marker had given up its scented ghost. You'd try to revive it, running the tip under water, storing it tip down overnight, anything to bring back that sweet artificial smell. Caps always got lost, ink dried too quickly. But for a few glorious minutes, your notebook smelled like dessert, and that was worth every sticky finger. Those markers represented something magical about childhood, the ability to find wonder in the simplest things, to turn art class into a sensory adventure, and to believe that if something smelled like strawberry, it somehow made your drawing better. 25. Department store. Christmas catalogs. Before online wish lists and Amazon Prime, there was the Christmas catalog. Thick, glossy, stuffed into mailboxes around October, the most anticipated reading material of the year. Sears, J.C. Penney, Montgomery Ward, each one 100 pages of possibility. You didn't just flip through it, you studied it, circled toys in red pen, dog-eared pages, made your case to parents like a lawyer delivering closing arguments. The arrival of that catalog was an event. You'd hear the mail truck rumbling down the street and just know, that today might be the day. Racing to the mailbox, you'd dig through bills and advertisements until your fingers found that thick, perfect rectangle of dreams. The weight of it in your hands felt substantial, important, like holding the future itself. Back inside, you'd find the perfect spot, usually sprawled on that living room shag carpet, stomach down, the catalog spread before you like a sacred text. This wasn't casual browsing. This was research. You'd start with a quick flip-through to get the lay of the land, identifying the major sections and getting a feel for what treasures awaited deeper exploration. That toy section was legendary. Dolls with hair you could style, race cars that promised to be the fastest thing on 4 wheels, board games that would turn your family into champions, new technology like calculators and tape decks that made you feel grown up just thinking about owning them. Every item was photographed with that perfect glossy catalog lighting that made even a simple yo-yo look like the key to eternal happiness. But the real magic happened in the margins. You'd develop your own coding system, stars for must-haves, circles for maybes, careful annotations noting prices and page numbers. You'd fold down corners of the most important pages, creating a roadmap of desire that you could navigate even in the dark. Some kids would cut out pictures of their favorite items and tape them to their bedroom walls, creating vision boards decades before that became a thing. The catalog became a social document, too. Friends would compare notes, negotiate trades. If you ask for the chemistry set, I'll ask for the microscope, and we can share. And form alliances around shared interests. You'd memorize item numbers, recite descriptions word for word, and engage in detailed discussions about the relative merits of different versions of the same toy. Parents learned to dread and appreciate the catalog in equal measure. On one hand, it made gift-giving easier. No guesswork required when every desired item was clearly marked in red ink. On the other hand, it turned their children into tiny consumer advocates capable of delivering passionate presentations about why the deluxe version was clearly superior to the basic model and worth every extra penny. You'd lie on that carpet for hours, stomach down, catalog spread before you like a treasure map, building your dream haul with the seriousness of a military strategist. Every page turn revealed new possibilities, new reasons to believe that this Christmas would be the Christmas when everything you'd ever wanted would finally arrive wrapped in shiny paper under the tree. Then maybe you'd sneak back later, when the house was quiet, and the catalog lay abandoned on the coffee table, opening it to the same page and wishing just a little harder. You'd run your finger over the pictures, imagine yourself playing with those toys, wearing those clothes, becoming the person those catalog models seemed to promise you could be. That catalog wasn't just paper, it was magic. Pure, concentrated possibility bound in glossy pages and delivered right to your door. It was hope and anticipation and the absolute certainty that somewhere in those pages lay the key to the perfect Christmas morning. And holidays never really started until it arrived, transforming ordinary October afternoons into the opening ceremonies of the most wonderful time of the year. If even one of these brought a memory rushing back, maybe the fizz of pop rocks or the rattle of a drive-in movie speaker, tell us in the comments what you remember most from the 70s. And if you want more memory lane marathons, check out our playlist, Things Every 80s Kid Lived Through. Tap into the nostalgia next door. The journey doesn't end here.